All right. Hi, Dr. Jess.
Hello,
And how's it go?
Natalie. Let me see if I can get this. Hang on a second. Apologies. What did I do? I've ruined Christmas.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Maybe it's this. There we go.
It's okay. I can edit it on the WebEx too.
Great. On your marks, get set, go.
All right. So, welcome to our Tools for Perseverance. This week, we're going to be talking about building virtual teams, and we are very excited to share with you tips and tools and also some of the research behind building teams and what it really means. And I also have with me Dr. Jessica Uriarte Wright, who is Dr. Jess, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm so excited, Natalie, to have you. Most of you know that I lead our Office of Academic Development, and Natalie Zuniga is our academic educator. And so it's such a pleasure to have someone who's such an expert in teaching and training come explain to us about building virtual teams and what we can be doing to build our teams virtually.
Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to share some helpful tools, particularly during these times. So, as you guys may know, we can go to the next slide. We like to start off with a fun quote. And this is a quote from Steve Jobs, and it says, "Great things in business are never done by one person, they're done by a team of people." And so we know that particularly even more so during these times, we really had to lean on one another, even though our team dynamics may have changed. Maybe we are taking on a more virtual approach or have learned to adapt to a different team because maybe you're in a unit and you've had to work with a different group of people, and there's just a lot of change happening, which Dr. Jess will be obviously talking about to us also about change and really going into the science about change and how it impacts us as well. So team dynamics is very important. And so for building virtual teams, before I just give you all of these helpful tools, I think it's very important for us to go through three sections. It's understanding the group dynamics, what are the dynamics within teams and what is happening that is probably invisible to the naked eye to some of us. Then it's how group formation works, and we'll uncover two different models, and that what we'll do the next day, the next session. There's three sessions to this part. There's three sessions to building virtual teams, and then we'll end our third session with virtual development, team development tools, and things that you can implement today within your team. So let's go and jump right into group dynamics. This is Dr. Wilfred Bion, who was actually an influential British psychoanalyst. He was an early pioneer for group dynamic research, and he really emphasized the need for recognizing groups are more than just their sum parts. So they're more than just your individual contributors. They're more than just a group of people that are made up of individual people, right? He describes groups as a system phenomenon. And from his experience and his research, he determined that the qualities that emerge of relationships or the group experience are actually determined by the qualities that emerge of the relationships from each other and one another. So from this, groups are systems and phenomenon. He describes two concepts of general system theory, and those two things that have impact, there's two things that impact actually group dynamics are boundaries and interdependence. So let's dive into what that kind of looks like and what do we mean. So first is boundaries. Boundaries, they are systems. He says that every system, particularly group dynamics, have boundaries which decide which elements are within the system and which elements are outside. So when there's effective group functioning, it requires the establishment and maintenance of boundaries. So while some boundaries are permeable, team members need to decide who is in and out of the group, right? That's what they're doing. It's kind of, he likes to call it the psychology of membership. So there's this sense of belonging that is very central to the development of commitment in actual group formation. So if you probably noticed when you joined your department, maybe you're trying to figure out, it provides almost a sense of comfort when you know who is on my team and who isn't, right? And even though you don't know this person maybe interpersonally, just knowing that gives you a sense of comfort and a subconscious knowing like, okay, this is the group that I'm a part of, right? That belonging. So there are different approaches to boundaries. There's formal and informal approaches. We can have some formal approaches. So Dr. Jess, you go to that's the belonging. Go one more slide. Sorry about that. So yes, thank you. So establishing boundaries, and the formal way to do it within your groups or as your teams form is when you provide, if you're a leader, you're providing objectives and policies and procedures, and you're going over outcomes, clear roles. This is your role. Maybe you go over your job description, and also you have some group maintenance, right? This is where the powerful part goes with establishing boundaries, and this is almost interpersonal. It's the informal boundaries. This is when you're generating emotional bonds, where you're probably taking time to get to know your team members. You're building a shared identity, and this is when trust comes in. We'll talk about trust in a moment. When leaders have an open door policy and you start appreciating the differences. These are actually establishing boundaries, which lead into interdependence. So interdependence, excuse me, is the idea that you need to depend on one another in order to succeed and in order to meet a group objective. There's a group of functions there's group of functions that only if members are able to depend on one another, now you have mutual dependence. But trust really needs to be there, right? How can I depend on you if maybe I don't trust you? So team members establish interpersonal trust for the group to function properly. Now, in this research, in this independent study, they really focused on two different types of trust. I know there's a lot of research out there on trust. And Dr. Jess, if you go to the next slide. And this is a paper on trust as social reality. And again, they did a research and they really found that I believe they said that there's 3 forms of trust that people focused on. It was the affective, cognitive, and behavioral. But out of those, behavioral is actually a reflection of the combination of affective and cognitive trust. So if we go to the first one, affective trust is actually a sociological foundation, and it's constructed more on the emotional base, right? It's complementary to cognitive. The affective component of trust consists of that emotional bond of all those who participate in the relationship. It's something that you individually have. So for example, I have my own relationship with my leader, and then I have my own relationship with my coworker. We all have, though we're on one team, we all have our different levels of that emotional bond and level of trust with one another. So these affective bonds of friendship or love, that builds trust, that creates that social situation in which intense emotional investments are made. And that's why this is what's being targeted when we have a betrayal, or if we feel like someone didn't submit an assignment, or if somebody talks about us, right? We have this like arousal of emotional outrage of that betrayal because we had built that effective trust. So believe it or not, even though within teams, this is very healthy and important, but also though you have effective trust and we want to build effective trust, it's also important to have that cognitive trust. And that's the second form of trust. The cognitive platform is kind of like when you are trying to do a negotiation. So maybe that doesn't feel as emotional, but it's strangers passing on the street, or you're closing on a house, right? And you're selling your home to someone who maybe you're not emotionally connected to, but now they're taking over your home, and there's like negotiations, paperwork. It's more of that logical process. It kind of, I want to call the cognitive trust, it's in a form that we we basically choose to trust someone based on circumstances. So it's a choice of use of good reason, right? There's constituting evidence of trustworthiness. So if they do this, then they earn this trust, right? This person is honest. This person is loyal. So it almost feels like a checkbox that they're checking off, if you have a checklist, right, of maybe competencies of trust, if you will. And that's what builds that cognitive trust. It's more of that logical, not necessarily so much emotional bond. You can write it on paper, and this person is trustworthy because of this X, Y, and Z, right? However, we always talk about, in order to build interdependence, you need both forms of trust. Because if you just had emotional content, then you would just be constantly just taking leaps of faith, right? And kind of being, there's the beauty of that logical trust. And you can't just be honing in on your cognitive trust without tuning into your emotional trust, because then maybe you'll just be so calculated that you only make rational decisions. So rational, calculated, excuse me. And then there's the beauty of taking that gut feeling risk as well. So how you build interdependence within the team and in your group dynamics is important to have a shared vision. And within your team, have a shared vision. Everyone talks about their goals, and they're really invested in one another. And each person, interpersonally, they're going to be establishing their own levels of trust, and that's okay, to give people that autonomy to really do that. Then you have the power of vulnerability with you. If you want to bring in your team, this is, everything doesn't just have to be placed on a leader. This is everyone who makes up of the group. If they're able to share moments of vulnerability, it really builds that dependency on one another. If you say, I need you because X, Y, and Z, or I'm having trouble finding this article, if you can please help me, whatever it may be, there's a huge level of vulnerability. When you have common goals, when you have, I know at Houston Methodist, we have Stop the Line, when we're able to really practice the Stop the Line. We're depending on one another. There's psychological safety, and we actually have a class in our department, if you ever want, on how to build psychological safety within your teams as well. When someone can actually stand up and say, hey, stop the line, or there's something's not right, and it's not just placed on the leader, but there's this true understanding that as a team, we will succeed. But it has to be all of us together playing our roles as well. Emotional intelligence, that there's feedback going on, because you're depending, I trust you, right? If my coworker is giving me feedback, or my peer, or my leader, or maybe one of my direct reports, if they're giving me feedback, it's because I'm depending on, my growth is contingent also on that feedback. And we're managing up one another, right? We're looking for something positive to really build on one another. So these are some ways that you can implement trust in everyday life, and that can build interdependence and bring interdependence within your team. All right, great. So your next steps, evaluate the team that you are a part of or that you are leading, and really think about, what are our current group dynamics? Where are we? Are we in that place where we're trying to learn the boundaries now with this virus and the fast change and having to establish new processes? Where are we? Are we in that boundary phase? Do we need to focus on interdependence? And what are the group dynamics? And what needs to strengthen as we move, when you really think about virtually, because problems just don't go away. If you're in a department where you're starting to move to more of a virtual use and, constant change, what dynamics do we have to take in consideration? Do we need to do more of boundaries? Do we need to do more of building that dependence and really trusting one another? Because, like, for example, in my office, where I office, my coworker, Dr. Lauren Irwin, she sits right behind me, so I just turn around and ask her for help. But now I know that I have to have a different form of dependence, and we'll talk about the virtual tools that we can use to kind of sustain that. And then the last thing I want you to think about and share is, what part will you contribute So are you going to contribute to building that interdependence? Are you going to contribute to communicate to your coworkers that you're trustworthy and do the work, or with the boundary establishing as well? So it was a pleasure talking to you today, and I hope that this is really getting you excited about our next section. Though we understand group dynamics, we will then talk about our next time we meet about how groups form.
This has been fantastic, Natalie. Thank you so much. And it's given me a lot to reflect on the group dynamics and specifically how we can strengthen them virtually. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.